Eden.
Katarina.
Coco.
Kyla.
Jim.
Rachel.
Carl.
Suki. Tony. Miriam.
Mary.
Well, there's no newbies here. You've all been here before. Get into it straight away. You know what we talk about, non-duality, which they describe in Hinduism as Advaita. Tell you it's the 5 factors: Sat, Chit, Ananda, Nama, Rupa, existence, consciousness, bliss, name and form. Instead of saying the bliss, because people get locked into that word and they think it's some esoteric or wonderful state, instead of saying bliss, we use the word stillness. Now, if there is stillness there, can you say it's good, bad, pleasant, painful, or anything about it at all? But it is naturally blissful, peaceful. And when you realise it is the base of everything, the silence and the stillness, the cognising emptiness, in which everything pattern, all these pattern, shape and form, the diversity that we call this manifestation, it all appears in that silence and stillness. Even to put those terms, any term we use is a concept, any term. That's why Nisargadatta would kick out every concept I ever had, even though I thought it was the most profoundest thing I'd ever heard of. It wasn't that as far as he was concerned. And I'm glad he did. There's a recognition, there's no word or concept I can use that can ever aptly to describe it. And the same applies to you and everybody else in this manifestation. But they are useful pointers. And we mean like a pointer, it points you in the direction, just like a signpost up the road will point you to Burke Road and Whitehorse Road, if you follow the arrow to where it's pointing to. But you're not there. As they say, the map is not the territory. You can look at your Melway and pinpoint the place where you're going to go. But it gives you an idea where you've got to go to, but you're not there. And the other way is the description is never the described. And what we're just trying to describe here is not its description. So the word is never the real. The word is not the actuality. They're good pinpoints. Follow them along and you'll recognise your basic essence is that stillness. It is that silence in which sound, which is a movement or energy, appears. In which everything is what I use the term intelligence energy. I don't use the term God. Because look at that term God. As soon as we got the term God, we come from different traditions, different backgrounds. Somebody could be atheists, agnostics, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Jews. If we use the term God, you're immediately related to what you believe God is. If you're agnostic, you'll say it could be, it couldn't be. If you're atheist, you'll say it's a lot of bullshit. If you'll say it's Christian, it's Father, Son, Holy Ghost. If you say it's some other thing, put a name and form and pattern on this thing we call God. But I use the term intelligence energy, and that's what the ancients pointed out. They didn't didn't have all these descriptions or ideas about it. They're pointing it out to that one essence. I use the term God on in each one. Hinduism does say it's non-conceptual, have a fresh presence awareness. The Muslims will say here, there is no God but God. Allah is his name, putting a label on that thing again, and the label is not it. The Jews will say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord their God is one God, there is no one or nothing other, only that. Only, break that down, it means onely, the oneness. Christianity will say it's Father, Son, Holy Ghost or something else. And so we go looking for this thing called God, feeling it's separate and apart from us, a higher power or a power greater than ourselves. But in the description of God, they'll say it's omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience, total presence, total power, total intelligence. Just the one. It's not something higher or greater, but it's the totality. And it's the totality we're pointing to all the time. And the totality has never been divided, never been separated. So how can you be anything other than that? And that's what we point to. That's the Mahavakya, the great mantra they put in Hinduism. I am that. Thou art that. This is that. Everything is that, they say. And what is that? And that is that basic Satchitananda. Beingness, awareness and stillness. You are that stillness. Just the same as it all manifests. Look out there, look through that window there now and see. The plants out there are still at the moment. There could be a wind to disturb them, change around, and though the plants are still, there's cars going by, there's all sorts of movement going on. In this room, if you look at it and recognise there's a basic stillness, these words are coming out and saying it. They come and go, but as the stillness, everything settles back into the stillness. Stir water, stop stirring it. What happens to it? It becomes still. Get that gong. I used to ring a bell in here every now and again, just to hear the sound vibrate through the room, and then what had happened? It'd peter out and it'd become silent. It doesn't go on forever. So you see the transient, the changing is always the movement. The movement and the sound, vibration. But the stillness is the base. And this is what you actually are. And when we say this, the stillness, we pause the thought. When that thought's going around, there's no movement in the thinking. The silent thinking is still, but it hasn't stopped the movement in the body. Heart's still beating. Thoughts, heart's still beating. There's blood rushing around the body. All sorts of things are happening in the body, but the mind is still. So you're not looking for a total stillness. Just the same as I say out there, now it appears still because the wind's not blowing, but there's cars going by and other things happening. And you recognise the base at which it's all appearing is that silence and stillness. And that is what you are. And that's the reality of you. Because it's not a separate silence, it's not a separate stillness. It's a totality in which it can vibrate into all the different variety of pattern shapes and forms which it does. But the pattern shapes and forms are not it. And in the recognition of that, that's our problem. We've taken to believe that all the patterning, shaping and forming and variation of it are what we are. But have a look. Can you say, when did you come into existence? What was before conception, as Adamson will tell you? What were you before conception? Can you say you're anything? Can you say you're any particular movement, any particular activity, any particular sound? You can't say anything at all. And when you were born, did you know, remember your birth? You can't say there was any words or any activities going on at all. But you can say, this is what I was, or this is what I am. And recognise that you've never moved away from that basic, static. It's not even static. There's no static form at all. It's transient because that's what the ancients tell us. It's constantly changing, appearing. And it's a phenomenal manifestation. Definition of phenomenal is that which appears to be. It's only seeming to be changing because it's never changed its nature. It's never changed its nature. And that what appears in it is constantly changing. Have you got the same body you had 5 years ago? Have you got the same body you had 5 minutes ago? When you investigate that and look into these things and see the reality of them, you'll see it's changing right now. You mightn't notice it because you don't know, but there are cells dying in it right now and being replaced. And are we sorry for those cells that are dying? Oh, there's 1,000 cells just died in your body right now. Am I going to go into mourning about them? The other thing is not realising the whole manifestation is transient. We go into mourning about this one and that one dying and leaving us and feeling it, we've lost sight of this or whatever. But realise the natural functioning of this intelligence energy. But the essence itself hasn't changed, and what appears and comes and goes in it has never been touched, never been contaminated or corrupted by any of the changes that take place. And we've taken on this belief, especially in the Christian religion, you are a sinner. You are a terrible sinner. And you've got to repent and you've got to come back to the reality. Who or what could do this if it is the one essence? They've put these concepts upon us and we've believed in these concepts, taken them to be real, and the energy of belief has gone into them, and we suffer accordingly. Is it natural for suffering to be there? When you recognise that all suffering is psychological, it's mental. It's not the actual. You can have pain, sure, but pain can be, we can withstand a lot of pain, put up with a lot of pain, but with the memories and imagination we put on it that make it 1,000 times worse than what it actually is. There's a story in some of the scriptures about the fellow who's been cut up, he's been tortured, he's been cut up into pieces, and he's taken it quite all naturally, haven't he? And they said, how are you standing there? And he says, I'm only taking it one cut at a time. So it wasn't I wouldn't like it to happen to me, but still. That's an idea of what we're pointing to, and that's the same thing. Everything can be handled in the moment. It doesn't have to be handled. It'll take care of itself. And it does. We've taken on this idea we are this separate entity. We are this individual. We are this person. Question it and have a look at all these things we believed in. And we don't. We go along with the herd. And the herd have taken it on board and everybody follows along. And down through the ages there have always been a few that have bothered to look a little bit further. And that's where all the great traditions of basic religions come from. Somebody has seen through it, pointed it out, and others have set it up and looked onto it and believed, this is it, this is the truth, this is the reality, and set it up as a basic religion. Christ never started any religion. He was lucky if he had 1,000 or a couple of thousand followers. He didn't even have that. He had 12 disciples to start off. And people heard the story and recognised what he was saying and added to it and made a religion out of it. And the same with every other religion. It started basically, the Buddha was basically a Hindu before that. Listened to the words of Hindu and he put his own version on it, which was a bit different, where they'd started to lose sight of it. He brought it back to its natural reality, and the Buddhist religion was formed around it. And the same with the Jewish religion. As Aidan was telling me, they've got 106, commandments now. What did Moses tell them? There was only 10. Where did the 100 come from?
613.
610. Where did they come from? So see what we've added, see what we've done to this thing. And Moses on the mountain, when he saw this, he recognised these principles or these commandments. He had all these people he was in control or had in charge of them, trying to guide through wherever they were in the whatever it was in the problem. And he said, I've got to tell them something to rule by and help them to live by, make them easier for them to live. He says, what do I tell them? He told him it came to him, these commandments. And he say, I have to go back and tell him something. He says, who shall I say sent me? And the voice came to him again. It wasn't some outside voice, it was his innate intelligence saying, tell them I am sent you. I am is my name. And that's what it said. I am is my name. And Moses realised, I am that I am. And don't you realise that? You are that I amness. Because it's that I amness, that sense of presence, that translates through the mind as the thought I am. Can you say you are or are not without that primary thought? And were you born with that primary thought? You weren't. But the knowing that you are was there before you learnt words. And the knowing that you are is still there, even with the words on it, because that's where it all starts with. I am this, I am that, I am something else and something else. But the this, the that, and the something else are all concepts. They're all acquired words. Every word you've ever spoken has been acquired or learned. And there is no word that is the actual. The word water is not the word. The word fire is not the fire. The word me is not what you are. The word you is not what you are. I'm saying me and you you will say you and me and all the rest of it, but that's not what we actually are. And we use these words, but understand that the word is never the real. Understand that the label or the concept is not the thing. And then are you bound into it if you realise it's not the actual? We're not bound into it. And the word fear, anger, guilt, shame, remorse, unhappiness are not the actual. They're sensations. Sensations are movement of energy which we put words on. We've labelled this sensation as anger, this one is fear, this one is depression, this one is unhappiness. What if you're seeing it as a fresh and new sensation, which it always is, and not loading it down with a previous label? Is it going to last? Do your thoughts last? Where are yesterday's thoughts now? You might be kicking them up again with the old labels on it and bringing them up and regurgitating them and fixing 8 on them again and giving them more energy. But don't you realise they're moving on? Just the same as the cells are being replaced in your body right now. And as they say, this manifestation is Maya. It's illusionary, but it's transient. There is nothing static anywhere in this manifestation at all. Have a look and see if you can find a static point in that body and in that thing you call mind, where you can say, this is what I am, this is static. What is it about you that is static? Is there any point when you look out further in this manifestation that is static? You'll find there is nothing that's static. It's constant change, constant movement, constant vibration of energy. I use the term intelligence. I can't tell you what energy is, can you? But we apply energy as a seemingly subtle movement, an activity. I use the term intelligence energy, the activity of knowing. Anyone who is not knowing right now, and realise that knowing, the ing on it, is an activity. It's not a static knowing. It's constantly moving. And the activity of knowing, any activity is a movement of energy, isn't it? So the activity of knowing is what I call intelligence energy. And that's constantly vibrating into different pattern shapes and forms all the time. And that is what you are. We seemingly lose sight of it, forget it, and believe we're going to become something. Becoming implies a future time. But if it's static, if it's not static, if it's spontaneous, it has no beginning and no end, there can't be a duration to it, because it hasn't got time to be a duration. Time is duration. It doesn't last long enough. And look at it. When does now begin? When you look at it, say, when does this, can you pinpoint this now? Is it static? As soon as you say that, it's moved on and say, no, it's ending. And where's it ending? Does it ending? Is it finished? It's not. It's beginning again. It's ending. And so it's got an duration, no duration. So realise there is no duration. There's no static point and no duration. If there's no static point, no time, no duration, can there be a path to be on? We think we're on this path where we're going to become something. Path has a beginning and an end. What if when it's spontaneity, when there's no beginning and no end? What path can you be on if there's no static point? Realise there can't be a path. There can't be a path without duration. And if it's taking place in volume, in space, in the emptiness, and you can't find a beginning to emptiness, or a centre to emptiness, or a circumference to emptiness, or any point you can say this is where it starts or finishes, can there be a destination to be on? So what's all this talk about a spiritual search? Trying to become something. There's no path and no destination. But where does that leave you? Doesn't it leave you exactly as you are right in this spontaneous moment, which is going to change in a seeming moment, right here, right now, present and aware. And as Sabine was saying this morning, take the way from nowhere, put the W off the where into the NO, and you've got now here. Tell me, has there ever been any other place than you have been other than now here? But we lose sight of that. We add to the story, believe it's this, that and the other. The idea of a separate entity, a person, an individual. We live in a term when they use that word individual, it comes from undivided. You know. Person comes from persona, the mask. We've got this mask, a conceptual image. And nothing can trouble you except in your own imagination, as Nisargadatta tells you. Imaging in. Creating mental images. Mental images, which we're taken to believe are real. We imagine this and that. It tells you in the Bible again, thou shalt not set up any, any graven images. You know, we should not worship any graven images, and we engrave these images in our mind, conceptual images. We think they're talking about we worship stone idols and build up patterns and places of gods and labels. But that's what it's really basing on. We graven these images as conceptual images we have in our head, and we worship them. Conceptual image. But an image is just a conceptual idea. Look at that pictures on the wall. They're images. Are they real? You can't say they're real in whatever's painted on those walls, those pictures on the wall. They're not in. The images, what they're setting up to be, are not the actual. The reflections in the mirror are images in the mirror. That's a good one to look at, because you go and try a reflection or an image out of the mirror. See how real it is. You can't say it's not there, because you'll continually see images in the mirror. Its nature is to reflect. But try and grab an image or grasp one, you'll see how substantial it is. It's got no substance. All you do is grab the mirror. When you look at your thoughts, feelings and emotions, you'll see they're all conceptual images. They have no substance. So these are things we need to look at, investigate and see for yourself. And realise the only actuality you ever got is the fact of your own being. You cannot negate that activity of knowing. You cannot negate that beingness. And beingness is something that's there in the immediacy. It's not becoming. It's not some future time. It's not wasing or will being. It's the actuality of this moment. And can you take yourself away from that? That existence, that beingness, that knowingness, and that stillness and emptiness in which it's appearing in. Try it. Look along these lines and see for yourself, instead of looking in the mind for the answer. We go to this satsang, we go to this book, we go to this next concept of this story, neurological, physiological, psychological. How long have we been doing that? How many years? How many ones have listed? This one tells it better, this one than that one. And whoever has ever worked it out in the mind. Try it and see. How many years you've been looking? You're not ignorant people. You're not dull and stupid. If the answer was in the mind, you'd have worked it out long ago. Mightn't it dawn on us we were looking in the wrong direction? We're always looking in the mind for the answer. It might just dawn on you, well, maybe the answer is not there. If the answer was there, I'd have found it long ago. Because I can work out mathematical problems, psychological problems, all sorts of different seeming problems, but I never find the answer to life there. Maybe it's there, not there for the mind to work out. And then you might stop looking in those directions and find, look, what's there, what direction can I look at if I don't look in the mind? And you look at that and you realise every direction I look at will always be in the mind. And the only way out of the mind is full stop. I'm not looking in the mind if I'm full stopped. And have a look at that. When you give up the mind every night and you go to sleep, what are you looking for in deep sleep? Nothing. There's nothing there. But have you disappeared? Is it the end of you? Is there any suffering when you're in deep sleep? There is not. That gives you a pointer to where to look. The answer is not in the mind. What's wrong with right now if I don't think about it? To do that, to have a look at that, you really got to pause the thought. And you can't pause the thought, but the thought will naturally stop of itself if you try to look at something without thinking. Just as the time if you ask yourself, is there a past if I don't think about it? You've got to try and see what's there. Instead of trying to stop the thought, really, what's there if I don't think? Try and find out. And when you look along those lines, you recognise the thought naturally pauses for a little while and not there. You can't say it's right or wrong, good or bad, pleasant or painful, happy or sad, or anything at all without the thought. But you don't disappear. You don't fall apart. You don't stop breathing. Your heart doesn't stop beating. Your hair and fingernails don't. The functioning's still going on, but thinking has stopped. And in that pause, you see the difference between thinking and the pure intelligence. Because what is going on is the seeing, the hearing, the tasting, the touching, the smelling. The functioning is still going on. But it's not encased in the thought or the belief. So you see the difference between the pure intelligence and thinking. Because if you were the thinking, the thought had stopped, you'd disappear totally. And if you were the thinking and the thought was stopped, you couldn't come up with another thought because it'd be the end of you. But that essence that is there when you pause the thought or when you're in deep sleep, that livingness, that life essence that's going on, enables the next thought to come up. You wake up with another thought and everything appears. If that life essence wasn't there, none of these things would happen because it'd be finished. But you're not. So you recognise the difference, and this is the important thing, to recognise the difference between pure intelligence and thinking. And recognise you are the pure intelligence in which thinking happens. You're not the thinking subject you believe yourself to be, the conceptual image you've taken yourself to be. And that's what we're fearful of because we never question it. We keep looking in the thinking, if I lose thought or stop thought, it'll be the end of me. But try it and see whether it is the end of you. And as I say, you don't realise that when you give it up every night, the thinking's not there. But what happens in that deep sleep when something stirs in that body, an activity of intelligence, and you start to dream? You've created a world in your dream. Created a world with all sorts of things are taking place in that world in your dream. And you, the entity, the dreamed entity, are taking an active part in it. Yet, you realise you wake up, your body hadn't moved off the bed, you hadn't been up dancing around, singing, carrying on and all the rest like you were in the dream. It hadn't moved at all. And when you wake up, you wake up to this dream character. And we don't realise that this is my illusion also. This is the living dream, seeming living dream, and it seems more actual and more real. But it is my illusion, as I tell you, an illusion. It's a phenomenal manifestation. The definition of phenomenon is that which appears to be. So investigate that person, persona, that believed entity that you are, that conceptual image, that egoic image that you think you are, and see if it's true or not. That I or me, you're taken to be real. And we do that by, you're seeing and you're hearing right now, and you're thinking and tasting, touching, smelling, all these things, but that can the eye see? Look at that, you realise the eye can't see. But the thought I see comes up, the seeing is happening through the eye, but it can't say I see. It hasn't got a mind, it hasn't got a thought, that's the instrument through which the seeing is happening. The thought comes up and says I see, but getting that thought I see, you realise the thought I see can't see. And this image you got about yourself is a thought-up image. It's me, Bob, the Australian, the good fellow, the bad fellow. It's a conceptual image made up of thoughts, concepts. The thought can't see it, the thought can't hear, the thought can't be aware. The thought can't choose. The thought can't do any of these things. So it's got independent nature, no independent nature. It's got no substance. It's a concept. Mind is a concept, remember that. And it's non-conceptual awareness. That's what they tell you. They point that out in the scriptures. It's non-conceptual awareness, awareness without a concept. And without that concept, is that what we call awareness disappeared? Because is anyone unaware right now? And you realise, no, I'm not unaware, I'm aware. But you can't say what awareness is because it's a concept. You can't say what it is, but you can't negate it. And you know, innately, you know that I'm not unaware. You are aware. So recognise you are that beingness. You are that knowingness. You are that what is appearing in that stillness or emptiness, or call it bliss if you like. You are already that. You have always and ever been that. And the play is still going to go on. And look at nature and see that it's so. Because nature is a dualistic manifestation. And there couldn't be a manifestation of any sort at all if it didn't appear dualistically. Because the main manifestation is dualistic. Day, night, winter, summer, silent sound, movement, stillness. Thinker, thought, seer and seen. Chooser and choice. All dualistic manifestation. And it couldn't be otherwise. For this manifestation to be, it's got to be dualistic. And the only problem with it, in nature there is no problem. Because nature hasn't formed an ego to relate to. Nature is just functioning naturally and spontaneously, and it's constantly ever fresh and ever new and constantly renewing itself. We've formed this ego and we're constantly relating to it. This is good, that's bad, this is pleasant, and relating to this conceptual image that I pointed out before, we think is the reality of us. But it's not. And while ever we're in this relationship is dualism. And there is absolutely no duality whatsoever in non-duality. And every problem you've ever had comes from dualism. Capitalism, communism, Catholicism, whatever all the other isms, come from dualism. So you see, that's where all your problems arise from. Understand it. It doesn't mean to say you won't be seeing things as dualistic, because you can't see them any other way. But the old scriptural saying, and which we miss out on, is know the truth. And the truth will set you free. And the truth is, it is one essence appearing, patterning, expressing as everything. That's what we point to. Look along those lines, see for yourself, and if you're seeing it, and you can describe it a little bit better or point it out in what you said, tell us about it, because the way you say it might be a bit different to what I'm saying it, and somebody might resonate with it and recognise it. If you've got doubts or arguments, or you've got some questions, bring them up. But the thing is, nobody's going to do it for you. You've got to do it, see it, and recognise it for yourself. And you possibly need to ask questions. You might need it to bring your doubts out. You might need to do these things. I had to. And they were pointed them out to me, and they were pointed out in a way that I couldn't but not see them. And it took away all the psychological suffering. It didn't drop away overnight. The seeing of it was immediate. The seeing that it wasn't the body, I wasn't the mind, I wasn't this believed in entity. And in the very seeing of that, the whole habit patterns couldn't last. Because I could no longer believe in them. And the intensity of that non-belief in them dropped away. And the suffering eased off. Then they can still come up. They can still come up and catch you now and again. But they're never the same. When you see something as false, it can never be truly the same again. It can't be the truth. If you see the false as false, it can never ever be the truth, and you recognise that. hang on, this is the same old crap, it's the same old shit, it's not the truth. And there's no freedom in it if it's not the truth. The truth will set you free. You're free of the bondage of belief, and there was never any bondage. The bondage has always been a conceptual belief, and a belief is never the actual. They tell you that in the dictionary, an unquestioned acceptance of something, an unquestioned acceptance of something in the absence of reason. We're not reasoning it out. We're taking it to be so, without question. Acceptance of an alleged fact. We're told this, that and the other, and all these alleged facts we're told. But question them and see if they are the facts. And you realise the only fact you're absolutely certain of is the fact of your own being. Nobody can knock you off that perch. You can't say, I am not, and nobody can tell you you're not. So we say, start from that fact, will you realise it at this moment or not? Or you can go back into the old way of thinking, oh, this has happened to me, and blah, blah, blah. I can't do anything about it. And nobody else can. All the psychologists, psychiatrists and doctors, things and this won't either. They can give you some bit of assistance, but they can't. Because they're all patterns of energy just like you are. You are, in essence, no thing. And all these, everything else in this room is pattern shapes and forms which are appearing in that no thing. So how can no thing tell you something? So start from that fact and go from there. There you go. What a question?
No, I'm good. I just don't like sitting in the middle. I'm good. I just don't like sitting in the middle.
What a bed.
That's enlightened you.
You've come up one step. You're on top.
Bob, does acceptance or non-judgment come into play when with this recognition, or is that another sort of mental process?
Well, you think he's always going to happen the same way, in the pairs of opposites. You know, it'll happen in the pairs of opposites, but recognise what it is. You know, and relate who you're relating it to. There's judging going on. Who are you relating it to? You've got to relate it to a me or an I or a seeming subject. But if you leave it everything as it is, you know, the judgment might seemingly come on. But are you going to fixate on it? Or are you going to stay with it? It might work out, you know, all right, but you're not going to cling to it or hang on to it. You know. Everything as it is means unaltered, unmodified, uncorrected. If you're judging it and clinging to it, can it move on? You try to find an answer, and the answer will probably come up spontaneously, and you think your judgment of it has been the right one. But the reasoning will still go on. Reasoning and working things out, and when we come up, you realise that'll come up spontaneously and naturally also. And say, this is what it is, or that's what it is, you know. But if you get some static point and judge this and judge that and hang on to it, think it's going to work it out that way. It's going to work in the pairs of opposites always and ever. But there's no fixated relationship to it.
because no one's here.
Where's here?
So quiet.
Who said that?
Who's asking?
Who said it? No one. But if no one's here and no one said it, the saying was happening. It was an expression of that intelligence.
If somebody said it, please own up.
What was I saying? Things are said, deeds are done, something else and something else is said, but there's no doer thereof. Realise these things come out, but you can't claim it any doership for it, any personal doership. So there's nothing wrong with the saying of the things and all this, but then you think, oh, I do it. Me, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. It doesn't stop the functioning from going on. And you're functioning, patterning, shaping and forming of these so-called human beings, and that's the way they express and pattern through the dualistic patterning. But don't claim personal identity of it. That's the main thing. Judging, feeling, tasting, touching, smelling, all these things are the same. But who's the doer? Who's the sayer? Who's the thinker? It's the same as the earth is rolling around the sun now. And this part is facing the sun and it's daylight. And the other part's moved away from the sun, it's darkness. Does the earth know anything about daylight and dark, light and darkness? It doesn't. Does it know anything about the movement, the rolling around? Know a bit of roll a bit faster or a bit slower? It doesn't. No one or no thing to take delivery of it. The seasons are changing. It's the autumn now, what we call autumn. It'll be a bit winter later on. A bit slower than the movement of the earth rolling around day and night. But it's constantly changed, constantly transient. But it's all happening by itself. And when they say self-shining, the sun is self-shining, you don't have to light it up. It's self-knowing, self-seeing, self-aware. Being, knowing, stillness is the self, not a personal self. And that's the only problem we have. We take the self to be personal. We think there's a personal self, but there never was a personal self. It's a one self. It's doing, patterning, expressing and patterning, shaping and forming everything. And you are that self. You are already that self. But we're constantly related to a person, day in, day out, night in, night out, for weeks, months, years, until something moves you to look at this stuff. It might take you many years before you start to look at it. It doesn't make any difference as long as you start to look at it. And some of you might move away from it and push it away and not bother anymore. That's okay too. That's the way it is. But others will come and continue to look at it and see through it. And recognise you are that self. It's that self that is aware, not the personal self, but that self-shining, the self-knowing, the pure intelligence energy, the one essence is the self. Only one self appearing, patterning, shaping, forming and expressing as everything. And you are that. When you say, I am that, just don't use the term I am that self. I am that stillness. I am that emptiness. I am the world. I am everything. I am no thing. There is no concept I can put upon this that I can say is the permanent, is the real, because it is non-conceptual. It is under no circumstances can I ever negate it. Can I ever say I am not?
So when you're asking the question, or any question, who is the such and such, is conditioning to like, oh shit, I better find an identity to answer with. This is automatic, like, oh, I'm on the spot. Oh, who is this I? what does it think, and what does it want, and how's it going to react?
You've looked at that before?
Pardon?
You've looked at that before?
Oh, in different ways. This is a slightly new
Yeah.
take.
You've looked at it before, but have you found an eye?
Oh, when I've looked for an eye in various ways, it's popped up this kind of search, and yeah, no, not really.
No, not really. You never found.
Mm.
No. As I say, maybe we're looking in the wrong direction.
No, I'm looking in pretty good directions, I think. But generally, I just put on the code if there isn't one, and why not? And if there isn't one, what's it like? And
Yeah.
okay, it doesn't have to be one.
Yeah, yeah that's what
That
I
works
said, doesn't
quite
it?
nicely too.
And that's what a lot of people come here though. They say, well, there's no eye. I've seen there's no eye, but they haven't really seen it.
Mm.
They mouth the words, there's no eye, then wonder why they get trapped in it again. But really investigate and see there is nothing there that can say this is what I am. The I that he talks about is I am, that is the sense of presence. Translates through the mind as the thought I am. The thought I am is just a label we put on that sense of presence. Can you negate that sense of presence?
That one trips me up. I'll never mouth words, I'll tell you if I get confused.
Well,
Or I'll ignore it.
how can it trip you up? Can you negate your beingness right now? Can you say you are not?
I could say there's presence and there's stuff.
Look, forget the word presence if it's bothering you. Can you say you are not?
It's the I that bothers me, the I or you that bothers me. But there's stuff and
Well,
there's happening and there's
if you don't say I, what are you?
you.
Your
There's
being?
stuff going on.
Are you
Stuff
being?
going on
Yeah,
in this
so you're being. You're knowing
existence.
and you're happy to be. You don't need the label.
I'm happy that there's stuff.
But to translate it, you've got to say I.
Mm.
So the I is the one I. Every one of us says I.
Mm.
How many I's are there?
I can handle
Which I is the true I? If there's, I think there's more than one I, which I would be the true I? If we all say I, everything must be that one I which is appearing and expressing as everything. If it's expressing as you, expressing as me, even though the trees and the flowers and the birds can't say I, it's still that I for one tree, for one flower.
When we say like I conventionally, I can take that because that's just a fake word to me. It's just, but when you get to start calling chunks of thisness I just switch off because I know I get tripped up, so I just ignore it.
When you switch off, they disappear.
Depends if I stop the thought. Depends whether I stop the thought or I start daydreaming.
But do you actually disappear if you switch
Well,
off?
the molecules moving around here, no, they don't.
No,
go
you
very
don't.
far.
Oh,
No.
it's good. You don't disappear when you switch off. The livingness, the beingness is still there. If you've got to translate it in words, but you've got to translate it in words to try and point it out and describe it. But understand that. When you say you switch off, you get confused or switch off, you're still there. You haven't disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, I just know it's a confusing area, so I set it aside and then go back to not thinking about it.
Then you're trying to grasp it with a concept. You
No,
see?
I'm not thinking about it. I said, no, I'm not going to try and grasp with the concept. I'm just going to say,
No.
you're not thinking about it.
Right, well don't think about it. See
That's
if you,
what happens. Isn't it?
see if you disappear.
What's that?
See if you disappear without thinking about it. What's wrong with right now if you don't think about
I'm stuck in my head right now. Sorry.
it? Okay.
No, I'm not. No, I am.
So, Bob, with thinking, I still find it a lot of effort, takes a lot of effort to remain aware and observe thinking. But it almost seems like when you're talking, it's getting to a point that obviously the thoughts are part of, you know, who we are vibrating.
Yeah.
But is there a point where you stop trying to, I know it's about not believing in the false self, but is there a point where you stop and just let thoughts be what they are?
Yeah. Well, when you say it seems like a lot of effort, who is the effort maker?
just to come back, just the recognition that I'm not
Yeah.
thoughts takes effort
So you-
myself.
So effort is happening,
Yeah.
but you relate when you think you're making the effort, that's the problem.
Yeah.
As Nisargadatta says, when effort is needed, effort will happen.
Yeah.
So it's that innate intelligence is making any effort. It's breathing you right now. You're not thinking about breathing or heart beating. That's effort. Who's doing it? Blood coursing around your body. It's happening naturally by itself.
So-
Effort is required, effort will be happen, you know. It'll come up with sorts. And look at some of these great physicists, inventors, Einstein for instance, you know, came up with all these wonderful things. And he had these problems and he said, you know, worked on it for days, weeks, couldn't find an answer, went to sleep one night, woke up next morning, it was there. Did you think he made an effort throughout the night? He made all this effort. Probably helped along the way a bit, but he thought he was making effort. When he found that no effort was in, the answer to the problem came about. When the fellow that did that, what is it? One where all the things came about, what do they call it? Where it all expresses in the different colours and shapes, I forget now. He says the same thing.
So
He worked on it for years and then he went to
Right.
sleep one night.
Stood in front of a fire, being.
Oh, where it all, one thing develops into the other all the time. It comes up with fresh and new different things. What's the name? Forget it. I can't remember. He says he went to sleep and there it was. Next morning he saw it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's very useful, but you know, like yesterday somebody was reading a bit of Krishnamurti to me, yeah, and he was talking about awareness, and he was saying, you know, are we really aware most of the time? He says, when we're angry, we're not aware of it, we only become aware of it, like it pops up at the later, and you think, oh, I was angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know whether that's, I don't know, so what, you know, this is like a lot of the time, you know, we're not aware, this is just happening, like in this room, you know, this is just what's all happening, it's all happening, you know, it's not, we're not actually sort of sitting here and we're saying it's happening to me, so it's just all actually just happening, and most of the time, you know, this is what experience is. There isn't any I that it's happening to. I mean, just.
And Nisargadatta Krishnamurti points out it's choiceless awareness. Doesn't he call it that?
Yeah,
It's
well,
choiceless.
yes, well, it is too.
No choice
I
making.
remember now that he did say that, but he didn't use that word last night. But yes, that's right, it's just choiceless, so it just happens.
Mm.
It's like an efforting to understand some control of how it all connects to imaginary I.
So we
Keep
point
trying to
out-
make something of the fact that we're just sitting here and not relating.
Yeah,
to
that's
the thing in
right.
the room.
We want to sort of make it sort of analyse it, but in actual fact, it's just happening, you know, all the time. There's traffic going past, there's people talking, and there isn't actually any. Well, here there's no awareness that it's happening to anybody. It's just I'm sitting here, and this is just happening.
Cool way of seeing it, because
Yeah.
I think we then just have a little wee fake efforting section to make it all mean something to me or happening to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody was unaware right now. Have you called it unawareness? Call it awareness or unawareness? Nobody unaware. Everybody's aware. So there's no choice maker.
I remember I've been challenged once by a shaman, ayahuasca shaman, because I had this strong tendency, while seeking the freedom from the I, to actually disassociate and separate myself from everything that shows up. I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my body, because I'm aware of it. And he said, why are you insisting of relating to something that is watching? Why don't you just let go? And while the anger shows up, just let that life essence be what it wants to be. It wants to be an anger. It wants to be an explosion. It doesn't have to be anyone who is there
Hmm.
to judge it or justify it or have any opinion about it. And this was the most terrifying thing for me at the time.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be just an emotion. And once you realize there is no I, who doesn't want to be an emotion? It's the quality of that life essence to form and shape and express us everything. And that includes the volcano erupting, that includes the anger. And trying to separate, disassociate, stop and relate, oh no, this is me, this is not me. Is actually the other way around. Is again a separation. Like, why not let it be what it wants to be?
And leaving it be as it wants to be, leaving it as it is. That's what he's telling you to do. Leave everything as it is. Nisargadatta tells you the same thing. As is means unaltered, unmodified, uncorrected, without trying to modify it. All this manifestation of things, patterns, shapes and forms. Nama rupa. Form, emptiness is form, form is emptiness, you know. All things are forms, shapes, patterns. But actually, their actuality is no thing. So let it express in all its variety, which it does, and diversity. But know the truth about it. It is no thing. It is the one essence that's appearing as everything. And what is it appearing in? It's appearing in that cognising emptiness, the space, the emptiness. Emptiness is form. It's appearing in that emptiness. It's coming up and it's patterning. And the forms are nothing but the emptiness. They haven't changed their true nature. Just like the wave on the water. There's nothing other than the water. The spray on the water is nothing but the water. Well, understand the label as the label. The word's not the thing. You know, you can label as much as you like. And you will. But know the truth. You don't go into Myers and buy a shirt and take out the label. It's got a label on its shirt. You don't walk out with the label because you know that's not the shirt. So the label of anything, you know, the word is not the thing.
It's interesting, Bob. Some might walk out with the label if it's Armani, Versace, because it's a very important label.
That's exactly right. We put importance on the label. And we get taken in by it.
It's like what you say, VIP, sperm and ovum, thinking they can change the world.
We usually forget. we usually forget
That one finished
the
up on the
label
blue.
sometimes becomes a lot more important than the thing that's labelled. Like, you know, look at money. I mean, money is basically a label for all the things that we call good. But we forget all those things that we call good and we go for money instead. You know, so there's a case where, you know, that we're, you know, it's just crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's right. You get a telephone book and cut it up in the shape and form of a $10 note and get a big wad of them, hand them in, take them into a shop. What are you going to get for them? And somebody writes $10 on them and
We've got a blind shop here, anyway.
there's a bit of paper, yes, what people, you know, take it,
Yeah.
put a label on it, give it some value, and all's got a print on it, different print than wood one.
And the other day I was at what's the name of that place? It's a grocery Aldi. It was a grocery store, Aldi, and this woman was yelling at her kid, and that sort of bothered me quite a bit. That I did the mantra of what's wrong with right now as long as you don't think about it. But in that moment, I'll tell you, it only lasts like maybe 5-10 seconds that I'm able to do that. But I got this feeling arose, I'll put it that way, or this presence of myself arose. and speaking of labeling, and I noticed that's what I did, was I labeled it, oh, love, right? But then, right, immediately, like a millisecond into that, I realized, oh, that's also a concept, because if there's love, as it says in the Tao Te Ching, where love arises, also hate co-arises with it when you're dealing with opposites, dualism. So what happened after that was I thought, it's just what it is. You know, and then just be. And, you know, but it's so subtle, that, you know, like you said, it's so subtle that we, or at least I bloody well label everything. You know, even when I'm in this state like that, I'm still, it's got to be something, but, and then I went back to where I'm staying and I'm reading I Am That. And I think it was chapter 12 I was reading, and in there, Nisargadatta is, he's talking about the capital S self, and he's saying that it's impersonal. And that really, that was a learning moment for me, because it was like, oh, for love to happen, or I don't know, comment on it maybe, but for love to happen, that means that there's got to be an object. And if there's an object, then that means you're in duality. You know, and if there's a person that you're there, if I'm perceiving myself as a person, and that other seeming individual is a person, then there's that love there. But that's even something I hold very dear, obviously, which is love. That's also a duality.
Yeah.
It's also a duality.
Yeah. And to say, as you said earlier, you know, even in the trying, looking what's wrong with it, and as you found out later on, leave it as it is, without trying. And it moves on by itself. Any trying or any attempt to alter, modify it or correct it, we're interfering with an actual functioning of intelligence energy. As Bankei says, everything is perfectly resolved in the unborn Buddha mind. He called it the Buddha mind, the unborn mind, or the clear mind, or the pure mind. That's the unborn mind. We try to alter it, modify it, or correct it in any way, shape or form, we're in problems. He says everything is perfectly resolved in the unborn. Nature resolves itself. And he says, why exchange the unborn for thought? If we think we're going to think our way through it or out of it, we're in trouble.
There is also a subtle aspect, because you said, I'm still labeling, and I had a phone call from a friend yesterday she said, I'm still judging. And there is a subtle idea here that, oh, well, I should stop labeling, oh, I should stop judging. But the truth is, you didn't do it, and you know it, and she doesn't do it also. The label arises with whatever else arises. Let's say the scene arises in front of my eyes, and the label arises with it. Or judgment arises with it. I'm not doing it. It's a habit pattern. There are neuronal connections there that just flash, and then it arises. And not taking credit for it kind of makes it
just
easier.
as it is.
We don't want to push it away. We don't want to change it. It's just as it is.
We're not relating it to some individual or person that is the judge or whatever it is. It's just what is. How can you call it judgment then? If you don't like it, and it's coming up as not being liked, you know, instead of saying I don't like it, well, that's what it is, and something will happen to move you away from that, or try to find a solution to it, or whatever.
And she's got a particular problem with that not liking it. I'm judging and I hate myself. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be judging. And this is also what is arising. You know, the stuff arises, the judgment arises, and not liking the judgment is just part of the whole scene. And that one is love too, because, you know, she wants to be nice and gentle and loving. And it's love expressing us not liking her own pattern of judgment.
What if she's judging? Why doesn't she give herself 6 months? Or 12 months? That's what the judges do.
Go on fasting, fasting from judgment.
Can I just mention something from one of your followers from online, if it's okay? Just like comment. Yes. Yeah. They just said, when you know your true nature, all the habits can still go on, but there is no sticking to it. The ease of being comes to the foreground and a true sense of love, loving to be. Stillness is clearly seen to be what you are, what all is, regardless of habits and patterns and the play of life. Yeah, so you don't stick to it.
Yeah.
Well, if you know a habit is a habit,
Mm-hmm.
it's not your true reality, you're going to persist.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to drop away, let it drop away.
I think that you find that they're not. That, I mean, you know, when you stick to something and then you realise that you're sticking to it, you realise that at the same time that that's old information, and it's dead, and so that's what causes. I think that's what causes the old habit patterns to drop away, because you see that they're totally inappropriate, because you fixed everything, and this isn't fixed. It moves all the time. It changes. So that it's the same with words. When you point to something and you say that's bad, you put it in a box, and then a bit later, when you realise that making judgments about things is being inappropriate because it's fixing this beautiful waterfall that's falling down and making it into a bucket of water, I think that it changes automatically and it drops away.
Yeah.
Is that right? I think that's the way it works.
Yes. Can't put any energy or belief into anything, it's not going to persist.
Yeah.
So, Bob, with thoughts, we're really not trying to do anything, because obviously we're already aware, but you would say it's a recognition and a knowing,
Yes.
not trying to be more aware
Yeah.
in our daily life.
And the same with thoughts. Do you think a thought, or do thoughts arise? Do you know what your next thought's going to be? So even with thoughts, they're going to come up of themselves.
Yeah.
Understand them. There is no thinker of a thought. Thinking happens. That means that thinking is happening. When you say, I think, you formed a subject. A thinker. Who is the thinker? Me. Who is this me? A conceptual image based on past events and experiences. A dead image, which were relating to the thought. Whatever the thought is. So there's that division. Thinker and the thought. Subject, object. But there can't be a thinker without the thinking going on. And there can't be the thought without the thinking. So they're not dual at all. They're two ends of the one stick. They're both happening in the thinking. And see that with all the other things. Seer, there can't be a seer without seeing. There can't be a doer without the doing. There can't be a chooser without the choice maker, you know. It's all dualistic patterning. But the actuality is the one essence of patterning, shaping and forming is everything, which we've divided conceptually with thoughts, images, ideas and concepts. But the word is not the thing, the concept is not the real. And the great perfection is non-conceptual awareness, awareness without any of these concepts. And even if the concepts appear, that's the absolute, the non-conceptual awareness. And what can you add to the absolute? If it's absolute, you can't add anything to it. So all the thinking and everything else going on is nothing other than the absolute appearing different. What can you take away from the absolute? Nothing whatsoever, not the slightest. It wouldn't be the absolute if you added to it or took away from it. Or the great perfection, it wouldn't be the perfection. So these things will come up and we take them, take one end of the stick to be different from the other, but it's still the same stick.
So when you say, stop thinking for a minute and see if there's anything wrong with you now, the absence of thought would be, and the experience that of presence awareness, that'll be like one part of the process. And then when thoughts come, and just to let them come and know that your presence awareness, that'll be the full picture, so to speak.
In the pause of a thought, just to see, with that thought paused, you can't say it's right, wrong, good or bad. You can't put any concept onto it. It's just as it is.
Yeah.
And you can't pause the thought even, you know, think you're
Yeah.
pausing the thought. If you look to see what is there without thinking, you've got to be pretty observant to try and say, what can I say without a thought, you know? Without trying to stop it, you realise you can't say anything at all. Is there a past without a thought? And you have a look, look at that, and you can't say there's a good or bad without a thought. And you get the taste of what is there without a thought.
So it's just a pointer, and coming to sort of, it's not about fighting against your thoughts, it's just about realising that's a part of the thing there.
And you recognise the truth of it, that's all that happens, yeah. And you're free of the belief in it then. As you see the falseness, we say, what we're pointing out, what I'm pointing out all the time is in concepts, with words. And the words or concepts are not the real, they're not the thing. But the point is that you can be useful if they're utilised. Like when I say pause a thought, people think, I've got to stop a thought and try hard to try and stop a thought, you can't do it. But naturally, what is there if I'm not thinking? Maybe you recognise there's stillness. Well, that's how I label it as stillness, you know, but you can't say it's good, bad, pleasant, painful, anything at all. Or emptiness, you can say it's stillness or emptiness or whatever. But they're labels are put on together.
I also remember one pointer that I heard you using for people, that intelligence is about to bring the discipline. The intelligence will bring the discipline in the right moment. And you were giving an example of, let's not go there, don't go there, or stuff like this. When you mentioned that there is an awareness and there is an urge to increase that awareness, that also comes from the intelligence. That's that part of the devotion for the truth, wanting to invest, is that urge comes through intelligence itself, to remember more, to investigate more. And it's part of the beauty, because on one hand we say, yeah, this is about not doing, it is about relaxing, about not trying to grasp. But the very trying to grasp also comes from that same source.
So how do we tell the difference between
We don't.
the heart's will and the conditioned will?
We just recognize everything as the expression of the same source. Whether it is heart individual grasping, oh yeah, that's what appears. Or it is intelligence bringing out that this is always the same source appearing as what is experienced. So on one hand, yeah, the thought may come, right, this is about non-doing, about relaxing. Well, okay, that's okay. And then another thought may come, no, I really want to get it, and the effort comes. Yeah, all right, this is what is right now. Moment to moment, there is different content, but the same knowing of the content. Because trying to break the pattern of efforting is even more efforting.
Yeah.
As it says in the Hing Sing Ming, if no discriminating thoughts arise, the old mind ceases to be. Ceases to be now. We see it in a different light totally. And no discriminating, not trying to discriminate.
What was really helpful for me is to actually recognize every action and every pattern as the same source that for me was easy to call love. The pattern of efforting was the love for the truth. It was the devotion towards discovering what's really going on.
So you're not discriminating?
Well, no.
So there you are.
I think that notion kind of just drops a bit of an unraveling, or a bit of, could be some people might see it as relaxation.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see it as that, sometimes. But I think maybe what it's really doing is just unraveling a sameness. Means you don't need to fight or build.
That's right.
More efforting.
But it does happen by itself without any really trying, because the incident I was talking about at Aldi, something I didn't mention because it wasn't important at the time, that I also noticed that when I had that, those few seconds of not thinking, and not only did the Nishigas that's going on up here in my head, did that go away, but I also noticed that on my shoulders, that all of a sudden they relaxed. And that was just totally, it just happened the same way. So I wasn't even aware that these muscles were tense. I wasn't even aware that all of a sudden being in that state of mind, or recognizing this is just how it is kind of state of mind. That happened all by itself.
Yeah. When are you going on Tuesday, is it?
But
When are you leaving on Tuesday?
Tuesday morning, yeah.
Oh.
I arrive in Portland 2 hours before I leave here because of the international deadline.
So what have you got out of being here?
Excuse me?
Can you tell us, have you acquired anything since you've been here?
Lots of stuff.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. One is to look the labeling.
Mm-hmm.
Another, and part of that is the fact of being this idea of being my past.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it sort of feels a little bit, for want of a better term, it sort of feels like a corpse in a way.
Good.
You know, an
Yeah,
American.
it's dead. It's
in San
finished.
Francisco. All of that is just like, oh, I can be just here right now. Why do I have to relate to the world? Because I was noticing when I was first here, there was this little voice in the head going, oh, we don't do it that way. We don't do this that way. Why do they talk this way? You know, that was when I was first couple of days. And I'm like, what? This is all just stuff from my past.
Oh, good.
You know, and also I've learned a lot, but another one was that consciousness is distinct from awareness, in that consciousness requires an object, because your consciousness has to have an object. Your hearing has to hear something.
Mm.
Your seeing has to see something. If there's nothing there, then there's no consciousness. However, awareness is there.
Mm. Good.
Awareness is there. I've also noticed, and it just happened just now, in North America, it's a rhotic R, so we pronounce an R like at the end of a word. But I've also, it's really odd because of being here for 3 weeks, I've noticed without even, it just happens, I'm starting to drop my R's because of the influence, because I'm in a different environment. You know, at first I'm going, what's going on here? And it's like, oh, it's just naturally arising. I happen to be in an area where people drop their R's, and that's just sort of spontaneously happening with me too. Probably if I were here for a year or two, my accent would be somewhere in the Pacific, sort of American, sort of Australian, who knows?
Speak like a fish.
Quite liberating,
So,
isn't it?
huh?
Quite liberating, isn't it?
Yeah,
Letting the eyes.
yeah. So yeah, very well. That's the key word, is liberating. Is that yeah, a lot of the things that I was attached to, and also, as you know, I was a Buddhist monk for 3 years, and also a lot of the things that at the time I wasn't able to understand, and I think it was because of the veil of the culture.
Mm.
You know, one was Thai culture, one was Chinese culture, and the other was Japanese culture. And for some reason, that wisp of a veil of that culture was enough to not allow me to penetrate the teaching. So the sensei, you know, or Fasher or whomever, or the Ajahn, they would say something, and it just didn't click. It just didn't click. The dime didn't fall, you know. But I've noticed with you, because you're from the same Western culture background that I am, I can understand what you're saying better, because, you know, it's the same sort of culture. And so many things that I learned, it's coming, the memories are coming back, and it's like, oh, that's what was meant by that. You know, like one of the things that that was always very troubling was when I was in the Zen monastery, is when the sensei would say, everything is perfect as it is, and I would think, it's bloody well not. It's this, you know. That's a mess. It's a bloody mess. And but now I'm seeing what he meant, what his meaning was. But so that's a major change as well. A lot of it's really interesting. A lot of the teachings, you know, that I've already had, I guess that they're unconsciously somehow, and it was just like my mind's like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Those have become clear, and especially something that I've been reading a lot that I used to chant all the time was the Great Way, the Xin Qing Ming, and that now has a hold, because before it was just words that I chanted in Chinese, which I guess it's nice to hear, but that, you know, that's not my language, and it had become, well, it was like, you know, things would become, what am I trying to say, they become rituals, you know, especially an American chanting Chinese, you know, it's like, I didn't really, you know, it didn't have, the original meaning somehow got lost in this chant and the incense and all this stuff. Whereas here, this is very Western, and now, interestingly enough, now when I read the Xin Qin Ying, I understand exactly what they're talking. You know, is it part of me now? I don't know. At moments it is, sometimes it's not. But at least I got sort of like a hook into it now, where I can go, I know what's being talked about.
Good.
But there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's enough. So I'm really glad I came here. It was worth it. 13,000 mile.
We will take it away with you and let it grow. Yeah. You got the basics, that's the main thing. And it will grow.
And there's always Skype.
Yeah. You can watch us. We can always participate in the meetings.
Ask questions.
Ask questions.
Kylie, you've been just down here for one night. What have you got to say about it?
Thank you. It's been just such an unfolding. I can't even find the words to explain, to be honest. It's being able to see things, emotions, thought patterns, etc., rising and then dropping away without that. Something you said to me yesterday about what's the first thing you see, and then you said you need to look at that, and that was last night. It was just, I was lying there, and every time thoughts came up, it was just so beautiful just to see them. There was not that attachment to it, and it's just hard to explain, but generally go.
Good. Take that away with you too.
Yeah. I thought I wasn't coming down for long enough at one point, and I realised the short trip has been a perfection in all of it, every moment. Something you said on one of the talks recently when I was listening, you were talking about Trump and how we have all put so much focus on, you know, the idea of Trump and what he stands for, and then you said, you know, you pointed to other leaders that had been, I think Hitler, or there was somebody else that you mentioned, and I don't know, it just gave me such an understanding of just what you were saying before, of that there's nothing to change. Everything will unfold. Tsunamis will come, cyclones will come and go, but everything will restore. It's nothing to change.
Good. You are that essence. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.